So now we're hearing that America is deferring the tariffs on Canada for 30 days, and Canada has committed to putting thousands of troops on the border. But let's back up a bit and see what dispute resolutions apply here if the tariffs are just reapplied in 30 days' time. Our guest is Andrea Bjorklund, Professor of International Arbitration and International Commercial Law at McGill University. Thanks very much for coming on the show. Without getting into this latest agreement that the two leaders have apparently reached, it's kind of surprising, isn't it, when you think we're supposed to have a free trade agreement with America, but Trump can just put on these tariffs unilaterally, it seems.
Yes, in fact, I was thinking about that as I was frantically listening to the news to see what the latest was. You could say the whole point of the USMCA and the NAFTA before it is to provide stability so people can make their plans going forward for some considerable period of time.
And isn't that, I mean, the economic uncertainty is genuinely damaging. I mean, a company might be very reluctant to put a factory in Canada or Mexico or the US unless they knew what the state of play would be.
Exactly. And they might be reluctant to enter into long-term sales contracts, long-term supply contracts, if they can't be sure what the price is going to be, what the real price is going to be.
So but say these tariffs return in 30 days for the sake of argument. What recourse does Canada have?
Well, I'm afraid I don't think there's any recourse that is very good. I suppose in the first place, any recourse would take a certain period of time, and a lot of damage would be done in the interim, even if there were good recourse. But if we look at international tribunals, as I'm sure you know, the United States has successfully so far blocked the operation of the appellate body at the WTO. So that means that WTO dispute settlement is possible at the first tier, but a country that loses a case at the first tier, say hypothetically the United States, has a right to appeal that decision, but there's no place to appeal it, which means that first instance decision is robbed of its effect, and the losing part or the winning party can't make it effective.
So you say the Americans have blocked this process at the WTO. How do they manage to do that?
Well, the WTO generally operates by consensus, and starting under the Obama administration, but then carried further under the first Trump administration, the United States would not agree to the naming of new appellate body members. So as the appellate body members' terms came to an end, then there were there's nobody on the bench. And the Biden administration did not fix this. So we have nobody sitting on the appellate body at the WTO.
It is interesting, isn't it, that the Democrats can be protectionist enough as well?
Well, traditionally, the Democrats were much more protectionist than the Republicans. The Republicans were not protectionist. They were the party of free trade. So it's a little bit of I don't know if we see it, it's some kind of full circle moment, but where the Republicans are even more protectionist than the Democrats.
Could you remind us what is the mechanism that Trump has used to impose these tariffs so abruptly?
So he has used a piece of legislation called IEEPA that was passed in the late 1970s and was designed to actually rein in the authority of the president, which had been given him under the TWEA, the TWEA, the Trading with the Enemies Act, which essentially gave the president broad authority to retaliate against enemies. So ironically, IEEPA was supposed to narrow down that broad grant of authority, but in practice, it seems that it might be difficult to challenge, although I am sure that we will see court challenges in the United States, which are probably the best bet to try to do something about it. Although even that is probably not very promising and not very quick.
I mean, I know this goes beyond a strictly legal interpretation of the procedures, but is it your feeling that Trump's motivation with these tariffs is not simply border security?
Well, it's really difficult it's difficult logically to understand how they can be about just border security. So, if that were the case in the United States, so IEEPA has been used to impose sanctions against terrorists. They've been, you could imagine it being used, or there are other U.S. laws as well, to prevent the export of dual use technology, that might be useful to an adversary in the military context, even if it's also, has a benign use. In those instances, you at least see a cause and effect relationship between the limitation and the potential threat. Whereas here, the blanket the blanket tariffs for every item, just there can't be any security justification for it. So maple syrup, why would raising the price of maple syrup 25% ensure the U.S.'s national security? There's just no plausible explanation.
It's interesting. I know before we let you go, some people are talking about Argentina was once one of the wealthiest countries in the world, and infamously it decided, no, we want to make everything ourselves and put up big trade barriers.
Yeah. Yes, well, I think in the 20th century that the world had moved away from mercantilism, from this notion of every country for itself, and had thoroughly embraced the wisdom of Adam Smith and David Ricardo. But it seems that we're regressing and maybe not taking all the right lessons from history.
Yeah, I suppose though, I mean, in the sense that we've lost so much of our manufacturing to Mexico and China, there is a steep price to pay.
Yeah, there's a steep. It's one of the problems, I think, with economics is that one tends to look at the aggregate. So you can say we're in the aggregate better off, but that doesn't mean that individuals are all better off. Some are definitely worse off. And I think many Western governments, and the United States is perhaps the worst, have not been very good about providing assistance for retraining. There have been the assumptions that people would somehow fall into their next job that would somehow be better than the job that they lost. And that has not always proved to be the case. But I should also point out that many of those jobs are lost not to Chinese or Mexican facilities, but are lost to automation. Yes. So it's not about different workers, it's about different techniques. And again, that's probably good for us all in the aggregate, but does not bode well for some individuals who have lost their jobs. If you are focusing only on the philosophy of free trade, sometimes you miss the individual impacts. And I think governments have not been good about providing retraining assistance, which might have ameliorated some of these negative impacts.
Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And Andrea Bjorklund